Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are approaching the end of the 11th edition of the World Policy Conference, and thank you very much for coming this afternoon for this final session. As you can see, there are 10 panelists on the scene with us this afternoon, and the idea of this final session, 9, sorry, thank you, Sangnim. It's difficult for me, to see precisely. So 9 panelists, and the idea of this session is to try to cover the question we were not covered during these 3 days of very fruitful discussions, if there are some, and also maybe to add additional points to try to have a sort of patchwork at the end of this afternoon. So I will switch to French to try to explain my personal view of these 3 days before starting the discussion. Je voudrais commencer par repartir de la première phrase du discours de Thierry vendredi matin avec la notion de contradiction qu'il a exposée. Et en écoutant l'ensemble des discussions au cours de ces 3 jours, j'ai noté 4 grandes contradictions qui, à mon avis, ne font pas justice à l'ensemble de nos échanges, mais qui permettent peut-être de préciser le propos de cet après-midi. La première contradiction porte à mes yeux sur le diagnostic. Nous avons un diagnostic tout à fait différent entre, je dirais, les spécialistes de politique internationale qui ont tous exprimé une très forte anxiété par rapport au diagnostic qui a pu être posé par les grands capitaines d'industrie qui se sont exprimés. On a là, à mes yeux, 2 conceptions au fond de la mondialisation. Dans un premier cas, une attention très forte portée aux possibilités de rupture de nature géopolitique. Et dans le deuxième cas, une certaine attitude qui consiste à dire que ces risques géopolitiques existent, mais qu'ils ne sont pas nécessairement dangereux ou qu'ils peuvent être surmontés avec une vision de moyen ou de long terme. La deuxième grande contradiction que j'ai notée, c'est la contradiction qui est apparue, me semble-t-il, entre les espoirs liés aux innovations technologiques et qui ont été exprimés à travers différents panels comme celui de ce matin avec les Young Leaders et les inquiétudes très fortes concernant la stabilité de nos écosystèmes, notamment exprimées lors du dîner avec Laurent Fabius, que ce soit pour le climat, que ce soit pour la biodiversité ou pour que ce soit pour les pollutions. Et donc je pense que cette question, cette tension se cristallise sur la notion d'innovation. Une question, à mon avis, qui reste ouverte, c'est est-ce que l'innovation, telle que nous la pensons, est faite pour essayer de changer de modèle ou tout simplement d'essayer de maintenir des modèles existants. Et ça, je pense que c'est une question sur laquelle nos panélistes pourront intervenir. Les 2 dernières contradictions sont de nature plus régionale ou plus géopolitique. La première d'entre elles porte évidemment sur la confrontation ou la coopération, je ne sais pas quel est le bon terme à utiliser cet après-midi, entre la Chine et les États-Unis. Je pense que ça a été vraiment un des fils rouges de toute notre discussion, puisque nous sommes dans une situation inédite où l'administration Trump ne cherche plus à défendre l'ordre international libéral qui a bénéficié à la Chine. Et qu'on a l'impression que pour la Chine, la prise de responsabilité arrive peut-être trop tôt, ce qui crée une anxiété palpable à Pékin. Et évidemment, là aussi, je pense que les panélistes interviendront là-dessus. Ça a des conséquences très profondes sur l'ensemble des zones géographiques que nous avons abordées au cours de ces 3 jours de discussion. Et puis pour finir, la dernière contradiction est probablement entre l'Europe et ses voisinages, qu'ils soient à la fois méditerranéens, africains, mais aussi son voisinage oriental. Je pense que nous aurons des interventions sur ce plan durant la discussion, avec, ça s'est notamment exprimé lors du panel sur les migrations, avec l'impression d'une demande d'Europe et en même temps d'une Europe qui donne l'impression de se refermer sur elle-même, alors même que les défis qui l'attendent devraient l'encourager à aller être beaucoup plus, je dirais, dynamique vis-à-vis des voisinages précédemment mentionnés. Voilà à très grands traits comment je voulais essayer de résumer nos discussions. Évidemment, il y aurait toute une liste d'autres contradictions beaucoup plus précises que nous pourrions formuler, mais ça va être le travail des panélistes. Alors, j'ai fait une partie du travail en mentionnant les problèmes. Maintenant, chers amis, je vais vous demander de faire votre partie du travail pour surmonter toutes ces contradictions et essayer de finir cette session et cette 11e édition de la World Policy Conference avec peut-être, là où c'est possible, quelques recommandations de nature politique. Je ne vais pas vous présenter l'ensemble de nos panélistes, puisque vous avez leur biographie dans la brochure. Ils disposent tous d'une très riche expérience dans leur domaine de compétences. Et je vous propose de commencer en vous donnant la parole, Madame l'ambassadrice, et puis nous suivrons ensuite, pas forcément l'ordre, mais je vous donnerai ensuite la parole pour 6 ou 7 minutes, plutôt 6, pour chacun d'entre vous.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Guimard. Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I would like first to thank Mustafa Tarab and Thierry de Montbrial for giving me the pleasure to share with this prestigious audience, albeit thinning across the days, a few ideas, and first of all respond to Thierry's opening address invitation to us all to consider all forms of common goods to humankind. Indeed, what is more common good to humankind than the human dimension itself? So my challenge would be, first of all, to keep you awake after 3 days of intense debates, and second, to try to make it on the light side, because so many ideas have been exchanged, but on the light side for very, very serious themes. So this would be rather difficult. Knowing that indeed the legitimate question would be rather, what place, where is humanity in the global governance? What place for the human dimension when inflicted extreme suffering is probably the most common shared reality across the world? When the rise of violence in international politics, which is of course the daily bread of certain regimes and of criminal and illegal networks, but unfortunately which are invading as well the practice of some, which is really, really frightening because they're supposed, on the contrary, to be the guardian of the rule of law, and they are lecturing the rest of the world of that, while the illegal, the tide, illiberal, on the two sides of the Atlantic is gaining ground and threatening the very basic values of democracy and human rights that the Western powers have been endeavoring to impose to the rest of the world for over a century. So my problem is as well another question, is that liberalism will have to seriously reinvent itself or it might collapse. So the question, which is mighty and it has been hinted to, what type of governance are we going to see after 2049, where the rise in China will be probably finishing the construction of new norms that probably it would like to share or to impose on the rest of the world. But before that really prospects, we have as well to consider where is the place of humanity and what is the role of the human dimension in front of the main two threats, the potential breakdown of the ecological and environment status and the technological disruption with all the implied risks. So of course we have some good news because we are told that the potential massive destructions of jobs by technological change would not be extremely damaging because it will create new jobs. And the assumption is that in the developed countries, which are using already robots and artificial intelligence, the rate of unemployment is not high. On the contrary, it's probably the lowest. Yes, but what about the cohort of all the rest of the nations who do not have this advantage of the advanced technology? What does that mean? It means that disruptions will be created by the rising inequalities and disparities, even much more than they are now. This is the first probably consequence, leading perhaps to a frightening prospect, which might be the digital refugees, which will come and overburden the existing very complex problematic of migration and refugees. I will come afterward, to that problem very briefly. So the second scaring element is, of course, the decrease in trust in science and technology to be able to provide all the answers to our mighty challenges. So this trend is absolutely devastating for, of course, R&D and investment. And I'm particularly concerned for Africa, where we badly need still R&D and investment to address and find mainly the security, the food security, the sustainable development, and beyond the transformation of the continent in line with Agenda 2063. I'm just emerging from a week on higher education in Nairobi. And I have some hope because I have seen that Africa is really embarking on doing its homework in line with what Prime Minister from Ethiopia told us at lunchtime. But still, despite the repath that Lionel Zinsou has mentioned, I'm extremely concerned about brain drain and how you can train and prepare all this human capital and answer the expectations of all the youth in Africa, which are really immense, and where, unfortunately, brain drain in a country like Morocco is still extremely concerning. I'm happy that my country and OCP are part of this endeavor for the transformation of Africa, as we have been hearing yesterday in the workshop about Africa. Second, addressing the impact of climate change and environmental deterioration is, of course, an extremely mighty endeavor that we are just starting to grasp. And there is some kind of awareness about that. Of course, the work should be tremendous and taken in place collectively. However, we have some kind of hope beyond the mushrooming initiatives, for instance, to clean the plastic oceans. We have an initiative around the Indian Ocean by 40 countries, led by South Africa, about a blue economy. And we do know how promising the potential of oceans is great for the survival of humanity. So the migration I had hinted to, and which was discussed yesterday in the panel about migration and multiculturalism, only unfortunately to ignore the second equation, the second component of the equation, and to bring in no solutions, allow me to address it in a totally different manner, linking migration, identities, and the diaspora. Just to remind us all of a few obvious facts and developments which some refuse to take into account, especially those who are in denial of the basic changing realities and trends of our own societies, incapable of inventing the future. They do take refuge in the past within their closed frontier. So let me just quote three of these realities. Migration and mobility are on the rise. They're not going to stop. On the contrary, they are going to increase, including because of the development of Africa, because the youngs will seek better jobs, better opportunities, and you will see a lot more of migration. So we do have to organize ourselves to address, all of us, this problem between sending, transit, and receiving countries, and you do know that my country is becoming these three altogether. Second, we do observe that emerging identities made of hybridation and cross-fertilizing are really far from the myth and illusion of pure races are really becoming the majority. And the third is that the tremendous benefit that we can derive, all of us, from this trend in order to capitalize on the wealth of our diversity and different culture. And Carlos Ghosn has given us the illustration yesterday of that. So let me give just a few examples about this, which nurture this hope, the aspiration of the common benefit, far from the caricatures which want to contain migrants into criminals, terrorists, or whatever. The first example, and you allow me to say it in French because we share this happy news with France. It's about Rachid Ghraoui, qui, comme vous le savez, est professeur de l'algorithme réparti et qui vient d'être élu au Collège de France et qui a fait sa leçon inaugurale jeudi 25 avril sur algorithme à la recherche de l'universalité perdue. Ce jeune professeur à l'école polytechnique de Lausanne et qui a déjà aussi enseigné à MIT, évidemment, a fait partager son universalité à tous les Marocains sur les réseaux sociaux. Le second exemple est aussi fourni par le beau sourire d'une femme marocaine aussi, Ilham Kadri, qui a été portée à la tête du groupe Solvay, le plus grand groupe chimiste au monde, et qui, évidemment, offre un exemple absolument emblématique à la fois aux femmes et aux Méditerranéens du Sud que nous sommes. Donc, bien sûr, une hirondelle ne fait pas le printemps, mais il me semble que ces deux exemples tout à fait emblématiques viennent à bout des préjugés et des caricatures qu'on veut nous faire avaler. So last but not least, allow me to make this transition about women issues in order to finish on a very happy note. Of course, I will have to deplore first that 50 conservative American senators have elected on the 6th of October Kavanaugh to the temple of law protection, the Supreme Court of America, at the expense, of course, of the heavy allegation of sexual assault and about his own testimony, and totally deaf to the roar of the Me Too who millions of American women were expressing. So, of course, this is really a very dismal evolution, and I'm absolutely repelled, like many Americans, by this move. However, we do have a very, very positive answer to this problem through the attribution of the Nobel Prize to two personalities, two of them from the third world. Nadia Murad, a 25-year Yazidi Iraqi girl who is the survivor of the ordeals that Daesh has been imposing on her, and her testimony is absolutely devastating. But with courage, she has been witnessing to make sure that for the human memory, this is not overlooked. And the second is the surgeon from Congo, you have all, of course, all heard of, Denis Mukwege, in Hospital Bukavu, who has remained in his country to repair the raped women and little girls from the savage ordeals, once again, of sexual violence used for conflicts. So, through these two examples, I think that we have here the reward of humanity being still worth being really fought for in order to become and prevail as the real value and our common shared value. Thank you for your attention. And so I do hope that we need a new narrative, because of course in the Mediterranean, which is torn apart, whether be it within the societies north and south or between the two rims, we do need, I think, a new utopia. And I would very much, with Harari as well, encourage a new faction for sapiens to make sure that we can still survive in our planet. Thank you for your attention.
Yes, please. Well, thank you very much, Madame l'Ambassadeur. I would like to turn now to Mr. Eizenstat before going to Mr. Johnston. So, Mr. Eizenstat has a very strong administrative background because he was Deputy Secretary for Treasury with the Clinton administration. So, sir, the floor is yours.
I speak to you at a fraught time in the United States in which a climate of intolerance and even fear is greater than anything seen in recent memory, accentuated by the deadliest attack this weekend on the Jewish community in the history of the United States, with 11 people killed in a synagogue, on top of a spike in hate crimes against all minorities in the last several years. My basic message to you is that President Trump is, for better or for worse, a truly transformative president in 9 ways. First, he's transformed the Republican Party from a free trade, internationalist, engaged party into a protectionist, anti-immigrant, America First populist party. He stirs his heavily white base with fears of unrestrained Hispanic immigration and what he calls unfair trade deals, and has won the support in the most recent poll just last week of almost 90% of Republican voters. Second, he's transformed more broadly American politics, polarizing an already polarized public well before he was elected, to the greatest degree in recent American history. The moderate middle of American politics has collapsed, and the willingness of Republicans and Democrats in Congress to find areas of compromise is almost non-existent. And yet that is essential to the governance of our country. President Trump has stoked these differences to a white-hot level, calling Democrats evil and saying they favor mob rule. As we go in just in the next week or so into a crucial midterm congressional election, this will all be put to a test. His base is enormously loyal, but his overall approval ratings are only about 40%, low by historical standards for presidents at this stage. However, several factors have recently energized his base as we go into the midterm elections, and what might have looked like a Democratic so-called blue wave of resentment against Trump and Republicans has been muted because of recent developments. And my best guess is that in a very volatile situation, Republicans will actually pick up perhaps 2 Senate seats to add to their bare majority, but the Democrats will narrowly, and I underscore narrowly, win the House of Representatives, which will have a major impact on the last 2 years of Trump's administration. Third, the president has transformed global politics as well by skillfully playing an anti-immigrant, nationalist, populist card in the United States, and thereby catalyzing and validating similar movements from Brazil to Italy, from Hungary and Poland to Germany and Sweden, whom he endorses and embraces. The thread that connects all of these is an anti-immigrant fear behind much of this populist movement. Fourth, he has also transformed in an unprecedented way the relationship of the American presidency with key U.S. institutions that had previously been thought to be sacrosanct and free of political and partisan pressures. The Justice Department, whose own appointed Attorney General he regularly castigates, the FBI, the independent counsel Robert Mueller, the press, and most recently the Federal Reserve Bank and his own newly appointed Fed Chairman Jerome Powell. He accuses the Fed of being, quote, crazy, loco, going wild and out of control over its recent interest rate hike, and expresses disappointment of having appointed Powell at all. Fifth, in a transformative break from the tradition that presidents respect, even if they may disagree, with international agreements reached by their predecessors, Mr. Trump has withdrawn from the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement, from NAFTA, from the Paris Climate Change Agreement, and may I just say that I negotiated the Kyoto Climate Change Accords in the Clinton administration as the chief U.S. negotiator, from the JCPOA nuclear agreement with Iran, from the Intermediate Nuclear Arms Control Treaty with Russia, and this is only in the first half of his first term. Sixth, he's transforming U.S. relations with our key European allies, questioning the value of NATO and its Article 5 Mutual Defense Pledge, and asserting that the European Union was set up to disadvantage the United States on trade and is our enemy on trade issues. Seventh, he's transforming U.S. policy in the Middle East, which had always been, and rightly so, strongly supportive of Israel's security, but which had also tried to be balanced by earning the trust of Palestinians. That's been transformed into a policy in which U.S. funds have just been cut off to the Palestinian Authority. To his credit, he has forged closer relations with the Sunni states in the region against Iran. Eighth, he's transformed decades of bipartisan American trade policy, showing a deep distrust of multilateral trade agreements, which our fellow panelist Don Johnston has been a part of, and seeking instead through unilateral actions to reach bilateral or regional deals that he asserts are essential to our national security. He's achieved significant success, frankly, in using the brute power of the U.S. economy in ways little used before through unilateral tariff measures to bend these countries to his will. He believes that U.S. trade deficits with countries show that the U.S. has been, and I quote, cheated, end quote, or duped, end quote, by unfair trade agreements rather than by market forces. And by doing so, he's achieved a new agreement with South Korea and a post-NAFTA agreement, which is more beneficial for the United States. Ninth and last, emboldened by his success in bludgeoning other countries into submission, he's transforming our relation with China in ways that will shape the 21st century profoundly. This confrontation is more than just a trade dispute. It is a clash between a rising world power and an establishment. He believes China's rise is a direct national security threat to the United States, just as Chinese President Xi believes the U.S. is out to block its ascendancy as a world power. Indeed, Xi's Made in China 2025 strategy is the Chinese version of Trump's America First, explicitly designed to achieve Chinese dominance in new 5G technologies. There's a widespread bipartisan consensus in the U.S. and perhaps as well in Europe and Japan that China, in fact, has engaged and is engaging massively in unfair trade and investment practices at the expense of Western and Japanese companies. The question is the best way to confront them. Trump believes that he can win a trade war with China because China has such a large trade surplus with the U.S. and because our economy is particularly strong at a time theirs is slowing down. He's imposed 3 rounds of tariffs on $250 billion of Chinese products, and these tariff levels will increase from 10 to 25% on January 1 unless a trade deal is reached. In addition, he's promulgated new investment rules that will go into effect November the 10th that will lead to far tougher scrutiny of all foreign investments, particularly but not exclusively Chinese, in fully 27 industries that he believes are important to U.S. national security. I believe, however, that as more and more U.S. industries complain about the negative impacts of these tariffs on Chinese products, as consumers begin to feel the higher prices that they mean, and as the stock market signals that trade wars are having a negative impact, the Trump administration will seek an agreement. I believe there will be one before the end of the year that will involve more Chinese purchases of U.S. goods beyond the $70 billion they pledged in the spring, with modest changes in China's IP and forced joint venture and technology transfer practices, with a commitment to negotiate over the systemic elements of China's practices, and the President will call this the best trade deal in the history of America. However welcome this will be, if it happens, the Trump administration has a much broader concern with China as a geopolitical and strategic threat. For example, their aggressive action in the South China Sea. These cannot be easily resolved, And so we're in for a tumultuous time in relations between the two great countries of the 21st century. I want to thank Thierry and Mostafa Tarab for permitting me to share my views.
Thank you very much. So in line with your points on the US, I'm turning to Mr. Johnston, and after that I will go to Mr. Sano. So we will continue on the US for a while.
I'll speak
before.
from here.
Sorry?
I'll speak from here.
Yeah,
because
no
I'm
problem.
also-
You can be seated. That's perfect.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Is it on? Okay. Thanks very much. That was quite a compelling presentation, Stuart. I mean, I think it was very, very insightful. I'm going to deal with 5 points very briefly. What are consequences of the Trump administration? Accomplishments. I remember Thierry de Montbrial actually in Korea recently spoke of accomplishments, all of which were negatives. But that was sort of Stuart's speech too. For better or for worse, it was a realistic assessment. And also, I want to speak to, I've got here my computer, I want to speak to the future of international trade without the USA, which has been discussed here. By the way, all these are drawn from the sessions to which I participated or listened to. The third is escape from the North Korea dilemma without denuclearization. The fourth is pessimistic conclusions from the energy and climate change breakout session. I didn't hear the report, but I did participate in the session. And finally, I want to raise a serious challenge on the educational front in the 21st century, which was touched upon as well in one of the sessions. Going back to the question of consequences of Trump and his accomplishments, he's already inflicted serious and, I think, lasting damage on the global role of the United States. And the post-war multilateral architecture, which so many people labored so hard over so many years, led by the United States, he's put that in jeopardy. He's trying to take it further, as Stuart has already pointed out. And on the shape of geopolitical evolution. Now, I asked Stuart whether Trump basically doesn't always understand the consequences of his actions. That's my perception as a non-American, but watching it. And this is an example of, in fact, you came back and said, well, if a lot of companies object, a lot of things happen, he may change and he may get a deal on another basis, which is an example of what I mean. For example, Ford Motor has said that it's going to cost him $1 billion. Pepsi-Cola, how much? I don't know. And you would have thought that he would have learned from the imposition of tariffs on steel by the Bush administration, but apparently he didn't. Now, the other one, that's an example I read the other day. Trump was thinking or was convinced that he should forbid visas to Chinese students coming to America. Now, we haven't heard a lot about that since, and maybe it's because it was pointed out to him that those students are contributing $19 billion a year at least to the United States educational systems and the communities in which they are operating. That's what I mean. He doesn't understand the consequences of it. We heard a very interesting comment from both the Chinese representative here, that was, sorry, I've got it here, and the Mr. Wang and Igor Yergins from Russia, when they said, well, there are good things happening for us because of Trump. The United States is essentially withdrawing from its leadership in the world stage. That means that there's a real opportunity to fill that vacuum. And that's what China, I think, thoroughly intends to do, which is another unintended consequence of perhaps his isolationism or protectionism. Bear in mind that China was the largest economy in the world in 1820, and predictions have suggested that it would again be the largest economy in 2020. That may be slowed up a bit, but it's already, the last one I looked at, which is 2 years old, it's at 11 trillion. The United States is 17, and it's growing. It'll continue to grow. It'll be the largest economy. What are the consequences of that in terms of setting rules for international trade, for finance? There's going to be a move towards China as the United States withdraws, abandoning its positions. So I think the issue on trade, which we heard about, I wonder whether if he continues with his protectionist policies, insists on bilateral deals, because his idea of making America great is to try to make everybody else less great. And that's why he doesn't like multilateralism, because when you're in multilateralism, you're dealing with a majority, which is not the United States. And even the old regime looked at, even the Republicans under Bush, I think, looked at the United States as the 800-pound gorilla in trade negotiations. So they always wanted bilateral, but they more often did, they wanted bilateral, not multilateral. And that's continuing. Even on the negotiation on NAFTA, you'll note that they took Mexico aside and did a separate deal with Mexico in order to bludgeon Canada into accepting the deals that they'd hammered out with Mexico. So I think that's what we're up against. So I wonder if it's possible that that can be countered. Also, Europe has a key role to play here. The European Customs Union consisting of 28 countries, and the largest market, the European market is over 400 million people, even without Brexit. And if they can come together with a coherent policy in one voice, they will also be an 800-pound gorilla. And so you would have at least another in the ring, along with China. So that may happen. I know that Kemal Dervish didn't think so. He thought that the United States had to be part of a multilateral free trade agreement. Maybe we'll come around to that. That would be good. Now, let me just say something about North Korea, that dilemma without denuclearization. Both in Korea and at this conference, we hear essentially that there's a pretty broad consensus that Kim Jong-un is not going to give up his nuclear weapons. That's the only card he's got. So what's the alternative? Well, the alternative, I think many people believe, is not to impose more sanctions. I think President Moon is probably on the right track. It's about time that strategy changed. And they've never worked in the past. And when you put on sanctions, they don't really affect the governing class in North Korea. I think if we went back to the time of the joint declaration signed by Kim Dae-jung and Kim Jong-il, which was June 2000, and look what happened in the aftermath of that. Kaesong Park, more trade, more investment from South Korea, more jobs for North Koreans. There's many people like the former Minister of Unification, Ling Dong-on, who thinks that's the way we should go. Investment in North Korea won't happen unless we know a lot more about the economy, and that's why I think someone has to do, the OECD, the World Bank, the IMF, or independence, someone has to do some kind of, get some transparency to this so we know what the North Korean economy can do and how it can develop. On climate change, I continue to be extremely pessimistic. I've been in this game for a long time. Stuart was at Kyoto. He was negotiating binding agreements. Paris Accord is wonderful, except that it's not binding. And not only is it not binding, but even if the national objectives, which countries have filed, saying this is what we're going to do, even if they all did that, it would not meet the bar set by the scientific community, the IPCC. In other words, we would not be able to basically stay under 2 degrees and 4.5 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. And on top of that, we are now faced with challenges of methane, which are very serious and have not really been discussed very much, but it's something like 30 times or more powerful than CO2 as a greenhouse gas. So frankly, we've been watching this for decade after decade after decade. Surely the answers have to be not more advocacy, it has to be technology, and also adaptation has to be looked at very seriously. Just look at the events this year around the globe. You can see that adaptation is extremely important. Last point I would make on the educational issue, again, Kemal Dervish made a point, which I thought was a very good one. He said, you know, technology is moving so quickly that 5 years from now, you will recognize the world today. There will be so many changes taking place. That says to me, how do we educate our university students? I was on a committee at McGill, like these are freshmen. How are they going to be training for jobs which don't yet exist? This requires a lot of thought, a lot of study, a lot of analysis, something I would like to see the World Policy Forum take on, because it's one of the most important issues in the 21st century, not just for the United States, which also, by the way, has a dearth of engineers, which is another problem that I was reading about. There are companies that cannot get the necessary qualified engineers within the United States, so they need migration, and they're having trouble getting some people out of the country. That was in the New York Times, I think, this last week. So that's a real challenge. I'll leave it with that. Those are the 5 points. None of them make me very optimistic, but there it is.
Thank you very much. So after the US, Assia, also the things you have said about climate change education, I will be glad to turn to Mr. Sano, and after his presentation, we will move to Middle East before going towards, I would say, the Great East, the European one. So, sir.
You changed.
Yes, I have changed the order because I think
Okay,
it's maybe a little bit more logic to go in this way, if you agree, but if you prefer to
Yes, he's a dictator at the same time.
I'm not, but
Okay.
are you
Thank
comfortable
you very
with
much.
that?
No, thank you very much. Let me just point out it's about 3 points. The first one is about globalization or anti-globalization and populism, and so-called, some moderators said that the established intellectuals. And he defined that we are the established intellectuals. I do not know whether he includes me or not, but it's anyway, that's his, the definition. I'd like to talk about go back to the 1999 in Seattle. We had WTO conference. Bill Clinton wanted to launch the new round after the WTO itself was settled in 1994. With 400 arrested demonstration, as Eizenstat was there, as I think he's the undersecretary, the complete mess. And we failed to launch the round because of the anti-globalization movement, mainly sponsored by the NGOs and developing countries, talking about all the new additional issue rather than trade and services, such as investment and so on. And at that time, what was the biggest is mainly the government, including the United States, tried to represent and support globalization on behalf of the globalizing companies. Globalization and internationalization is a little different. International companies respect more local authorities and local rules. The global companies wants to keep their own global standard and push all the countries to accept such kind of global standard. That's a big difference between global companies and international companies or international standard itself. And a significant issue at that time, what we discussed is so-called Investor-State Dispute Settlement Agreement, ISDS, that all the global companies can raise any kind of complaints or claim to the government directly, hosting government. This is the new dimension at that time. But certainly, if you read a little that's about the article, USMCA, United States pulled out ISDS clause from the agreement between Canada and the United States. And at the same time, just one year before, almost toward the end of the TPP, when the United States finally pulled out, they said one of the reasons is because there is ISDS. ISDS itself is proposed by the United States on behalf of all the global companies, but finally they didn't. Now they are coming back too. In that sense, the local authorities or local rules. And I think that is one of the big phenomena what is going on. That is not the trade or trading services. Mainly that is more investment or some other agreement or regulations. That's one thing. The second point what I would like to raise is the U.S.-China the many people that I was asked many times in Japan, what is the impact of the US-China trade war and so on. But I said, this is not the trade war. Actually, the war in hegemonial thing, or hegemony, in particular in the field of cyber technology or cyber space and so on. Okay, you can say that, for example, the quantum computing, internet, this you can pick up some of the cyber attack, or there's some kind of the cyber technologies, or there's some, let's say, the domestic intervention made by the cyber attack and so on, which is already said by the United States, Vice President Pence, in addition to the intellectual property rights issue, or some of what to say, bilateral trade issues, blah, 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 blah. But real core part is not really the trade. That's the second point, what I like to say. And at that time, maybe European Union's approach can be appreciated when we are going to solve this kind of question in the cyberspace. It's one that's not completely, but a part of the solution is the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, proposed by the European Union, and many of the companies, including all the global GAFA companies, have to oblige with all that kind of the regulations. And that kind of stuff is maybe a good thing to do. The third point is what I like to raise is the North Korea, as a friend of mine, the Johnston has already raised. I think for the time being, the real, winner so far is Kim Jong-un. I think Trump is not making any success in that sense. Even though he says that, well, he protected United States, or mainly it is the mainland US, by stopping all the, threat of the nuclear bomb into the mainland. But the issue is, as Japan or some other neighboring countries or international community is raising about denuclearization issue, I don't think that will go. There's no way to. At least when North Korea raised the issue about the peace treaty, I don't think the Western world is ready, in particular the United States, ready to go into that kind of the peace treaty with North Korea, including China and so on. And in that sense, the issue itself, as I said, that it's not moving. And why Japan is not so much concerned? It's because the issue itself or the situation is not changed more than 30 years. Once North Korea started nuclear programs and so on, we are always under pressure and threat with nuclear bomb and mid-range missile. US issue is ICBM. So for the time being, when the North Korea committed not to launch any ICBM, the United States can say that, or Trump can say that the United States is completely safe. But Japan, Korea, some other neighboring countries are not safe enough. But I don't think, because of the players are different, it will not go on. And Japan is not really the main player in this negotiation itself, I have to confess. So, well, as I just have to conclude, I think there was no way to go about North Korea. I'm pessimistic, but at the same time, as usual. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. On Friday afternoon, we have a very lively discussion on Middle East, which was also quite pessimistic. So, Leo Gross, you are just back from the Middle East. How could you share your very fresh views on the situation, and how could you add to the discussion we had, on Friday afternoon?
Merci à Thierry de Montréal et à toute l'équipe de l'Ifri pour cette invitation. Effectivement, j'arrive de Bahreïn. J'étais hier à la conférence de sécurité du Golfe, la Berkound du Golfe, et j'ai perçu un climat de préoccupation. Tout le monde est convaincu qu'il y a un tremblement de terre. Tous les protocoles d'émergence sont activés. Je dirais qu'en général, c'est des protocoles d'émergence pour des répliques. Donc, les amis du Golfe actuellement attendent encore des tremblements de terre, de nouveaux tremblements de terre, mais des répliques. Le plus grave, d'après leurs impressions, c'est déjà passé, c'est déjà derrière, mais il y aura encore d'autres. Alors, pour organiser un peu mes pensées, 3 grandes idées. L'Arabie Saoudite d'abord, le Golfe et plutôt les relations de la communauté internationale avec les pays du Golfe, rapidement. Pour l'Arabie Saoudite, quelques idées. La première idée que je trouvais très forte, et peut-être beaucoup de monde ici seront surpris, mais je perçois une impression très forte de la part des pays du Golfe que Mohammed bin Salman n'est pas l'auteur intellectuel de l'assassinat de Khashoggi. Et ils disent, vous avez une impression, un Occident très caricatural du personnage, très caricatural de l'Arabie Saoudite, mais si vous voulez assassiner un ennemi ou un dissident, vous n'envoyez pas des avions avec 15 personnes dans un pays comme la Turquie, qui n'est pas précisément l'allié le plus important que l'Arabie Saoudite a dans le monde. Ils pensent, et j'insiste, je vous transmets ce que j'ai vu hier au Bahreïn, ils disent même si les Saoudiens ne sont pas les plus sophistiqués du monde, ils ne feraient pas une chose pareille. Imaginez qu'une opération avec 15 personnes, des avions, tellement de déploiement de forces, en Turquie pourrait se passer bien. Pour eux, ça ne marche pas. Pour le pays du Golfe, ce n'est pas possible. Donc, la première idée très forte, et je trouvais ça dans les acteurs de différents pays du Golfe, cette idée très forte. Deuxième idée, je perçus aussi très fort, il n'y a pas une alternative. C'est-à-dire l'alternative à Mohammed bin Salman 1.0, c'est Mohammed bin Salman 2.0. L'avis des gens du Golfe, quand on leur pose la question, est-ce qu'il y a quelqu'un d'autre qui pourrait répondre? Ils sont tous aussi, il n'y a pas, et ce n'est pas une question personnelle. Évidemment, il y a une relation avec la manière personnelle où il a exercé le pouvoir, mais c'est surtout l'énergie, c'est surtout tout le pouvoir qu'il a accumulé dans une situation qui n'a pas de précédent dans le pays et probablement dans le Golfe. Ce n'est pas la façon de faire politique traditionnellement au Golfe. Donc il trouve que une fois que les choses sont évoluées de cette façon, même s'il a fait des erreurs énormes, et on ne le considère pas responsable directement de ce qui s'est passé, mais il le considère responsable du climat qui a permis qu'un groupe d'assassins se soit déplacé en Turquie pour faire une chose pareille. Ça, c'est sans doute le résultat de politiques, de climat qu'il a personnellement créée. Une autre idée, une autre préoccupation que je trouvais de façon très forte, énormément de préoccupations que les réformes s'arrêtent. C'est-à-dire que les conservateurs d'Arabie Saoudite utilisent cette situation pour imposer une agenda conservatrice, une agenda contre les réformes. Ça, c'est une grande préoccupation parce qu'au Golfe, finalement, et ça n'a rien à voir directement avec Mohammed bin Salman, tout le monde est d'accord que retourner au wahhabisme radical, c'est destructif pour l'Arabie Saoudite et c'est destructif pour le Golfe, pour les pays du Golfe. Hein. Une autre idée très forte aussi, préoccupation pour des possibles mouvements internes dans la famille royale. Donc, même si on considère qu'il n'y a pas d'alternative, je trouvais aussi quelques interlocuteurs qui sont préoccupés sur le possible mouvement qu'on pourrait voir. Je crois que ça serait des répliques, j'insiste, pas de nouveaux tremblements de terre, pas de nouveaux grands mouvements, mais quand même des situations qui pourraient être déstabilisantes pour l'Arabie Saoudite et pour le Golfe. Et finalement, je dirais aussi, il y a une préoccupation des alliés de l'Occident vis-à-vis de la possibilité, les amis du Golfe, et je pense qu'ils le disent sans aucun cynisme. Ils disent, cette vision que vous avez en Occident, on respecte, évidemment, ceux qui sont derrière cet assassinat totalement exécrable doivent payer. Et nous comprenons très bien la préoccupation de l'Occident. Mais attention, parce qu'il y a des acteurs internationaux qui ne partagent pas cette préoccupation et qui vont utiliser cette situation, ce possible problème entre les pays occidentaux et l'Arabie Saoudite pour essayer de jouer de nouveau ces cartes dans le Golfe. Hein. Bon, de point de vue, on laisse l'Arabie Saoudite, de point de vue Golfe. Alors, d'abord, nous voyons que la Turquie utilise cette situation pour envoyer un message très fort à la communauté internationale. Nous n'acceptons pas cette situation. Nous sommes des démocrates. Nous croyons que les journalistes, même les dissidents, ne peuvent pas être traités comme ça. Donc, nous voyons un message de la Turquie qui évidemment répond aussi à une situation interne en Turquie que nous connaissons très bien. Mais pour le pays du Golfe, il s'agit simplement d'une opération de la Turquie pour diminuer le pouvoir ou l'influence de l'Arabie Saoudite et évidemment jouer un rôle plus important dans le Golfe. Et évidemment, ce que j'ai perçu hier au Bahreïn, et ce que je perçois avec mes interlocuteurs au Golfe, ça va que rallier et faire plus forte l'alliance des pays du Golfe. C'est-à-dire, ça provoque des préoccupations. Il y a toujours une dimension iranienne. Ils voient l'Iran partout. Peut-être ils sont récents, peut-être pas, mais l'obsession sur l'Iran reste très forte. Donc, à mon avis, ce que j'ai vu hier, évidemment, la réunion au Bahreïn, c'est une réunion plutôt du domaine de la sécurité, du domaine militaire. L'idée de l'OTAN arabe, de cette alliance militaire des pays du Golfe avec l'Égypte et la Jordanie, est plus forte que jamais. Je ne sais pas si ils pourront le faire, mais les dernières 2-3 ans, je n'ai pas vu une intensité, et peut-être la Turquie, avec cette pression, est en train de pousser dans cette direction. Finalement, quelques commentaires du point de vue de la communauté internationale. Je pense que le speech de Mattis, du général Mattis, a été intéressant. Il a dit deux choses. D'abord, sur la question de l'Arabie Saoudite, c'est le Congrès et le Sénat qui vont jouer le rôle le plus important. Ça fait du sens. ils ne veulent pas, je pense, 2 semaines avant les élections, d'assumer le rôle le plus important vis-à-vis de cette crise. Ils laissent le Congrès et le Sénat. Ils savent aussi que la crédibilité de n'importe quelle réaction chez le Congrès et le Sénat sera plus forte que chez la présidence. Donc, c'est un message important parce que je pense, pour ce qui attend président Trump qui va jouer en faveur de l'Arabie saoudite, pour le moment, je vois qu'il laisse, et il y avait quelques sénateurs américains là-bas, ils ont parlé ouvertement des sanctions, ils ont ouvert le climat au Sénat, je pense que c'est très négatif vis-à-vis de l'Arabie saoudite. L'autre question intéressante, c'est que Matisse a parlé carrément et avec beaucoup d'intensité du besoin de parvenir à un accord de paix, d'arrêter la guerre au Yémen. Et il a dit très clairement, dans l'agenda, dans les prochaines semaines, c'est le Yémen, et c'est la guerre du Yémen qui va être centrale. Et il a donné même quelques paramètres, respect de frontières, autonomie, un rôle politique pour les Houthis au Yémen, retrait de l'Iran, et évidemment préoccupation pour les armes que l'Iran serait en train d'exporter au Yémen, et rôle central aussi pour les Nations Unies, ce qui, venant d'une administration qui n'a pas été précisément pro-Nations Unies et pro-gouvernance globale, je pense que c'est un message intéressant.
Merci beaucoup pour votre exposé qui nous fait partager ce que vous avez pu entendre à Bahreïn. Vous n'avez pas mentionné la Russie, qui est un acteur évidemment très important depuis son engagement en Syrie. Donc c'est une manière pour moi de me tourner vers le tandem franco-russe ici réuni, avec l'ambassadeur Pierre Morel et puis Artem Malgin. Donc je vais vous donner la parole, monsieur l'ambassadeur, et puis ensuite nous écouterons Artem. Je ne sais pas si Artem parlera de la Syrie. Je crois que vous en direz un mot, mais s'il n'en parle pas, je pense que nous aborderons le sujet pendant la discussion.
Merci Thomas, merci à Thierry, à toute l'équipe de l'Ifri, de la World Policy Conference pour cette 11e session très réussie et très stimulante. J'aborderai 3 sujets qui ont été un peu évoqués ou pas du tout. Les questions d'identité, le conflit en Ukraine et la renonciation unilatérale au traité FNI de la part des États-Unis. L'identité, on en a parlé ici ou là, ce n'est pas un sujet facile, il n'est pas facile à saisir et en même temps, on a vu quand même monter cette thématique en politique intérieure, aussi en politique internationale. Et au fond, tout le monde peut admettre aujourd'hui qu'il y a une interaction très directe entre la mondialisation et le réflexe identitaire. Mais ce n'est pas simplement un réflexe, une espèce de compensation qu'on pourrait qualifier de naturelle. Ça va beaucoup plus loin. C'est une véritable régression dans beaucoup de cas. Et c'est un sujet qu'il faut aborder. Très modestement, petit format, boutique, l'Observatoire Pharos que nous avons lancé, un groupe d'amis, il y a une dizaine d'années, a essayé d'aborder plus directement ce sujet dans des zones de conflit, de menaces ou de pure réduction des minorités. Je ne vais pas l'aborder maintenant, mais on voit bien qu'il y a là une menace qui se propage, une espèce de maladie qui se répand, de régression, de réduction de l'autre. Et c'est un phénomène que l'on a un peu trop tendance à immédiatement placer sur le terrain religieux. Et évidemment, les minorités religieuses sont menacées, pas simplement proches au Moyen-Orient, mais ça n'est pas seulement religieux. C'est pour ça que nous insistons sur le pluralisme culturel et religieux. Le contre-exemple que je prends toujours, c'est de dire pardon à nos amis espagnols, allez à Barcelone, et si vous trouvez à Barcelone des indices religieux, tant mieux. Mais on a affaire à des réflexes identitaires, que je ne veux pas qualifier au-delà, mais qui n'ont rien à voir avec le religieux. Donc, ce serait réducteur, même si il y a une réalité et la composante religieuse, qui n'est pas forcément un retour, mais qui est un élément mobilisateur dans le réflexe identitaire, est devenu quelque chose qui, évidemment, est un peu obsédant. Donc, tout le problème que l'on a, c'est qu'on a une approche réductrice de l'identité et, au fond, c'est une identité de rejet que l'on cherche à mobiliser, alors que, quand vous regardez l'histoire, c'est plutôt où vous pouvez plutôt vous référer à une sorte de projet. Pourquoi cette réduction quand en réalité, ce que l'on peut essayer de définir comme identité évolue avec le temps, elle n'est pas fixée une fois pour toutes, en fonction du contexte. Alors, il ne faut pas la nier, c'est une réalité historique et c'est même un besoin. C'est un besoin qu'il faut reconnaître aujourd'hui. Mais il ne faut pas l'essentialiser, le ramener à une seule dimension, et c'est là que le danger devient terrible. Parce qu'il y a de quoi nourrir des conflits et des confrontations et des éliminations au besoin radical. Et le prix Nobel donné à une Yézidi récemment, on a vu ce que ça veut dire que de réduire et de rejeter et d'éliminer une minorité de façon quasiment irréversible. Et ça n'est pas la seule, loin de là. Alors, je crois que là, il y a un premier signal à retenir. Comment aborder ce sujet? Le nier serait absurde, mais en même temps, l'essentialiser, c'est la pente glissante qui va vers le drame et le crime. Le deuxième point que je voudrais évoquer très rapidement, c'est le conflit ukrainien. Je crois qu'on n'en a pratiquement pas parlé pendant ces 3 jours. Et, pardon, mais dans la mesure où je suis en charge avec toute une équipe de l'OSCE, de la médiation proprement politique, de la négociation qui était censée régler ce conflit et qui ne fait malheureusement au mieux autant que possible que de la gestion de conflit, il y a là un phénomène grave et ce que j'appelle une tragédie oubliée et d'une certaine façon, pire encore, elle n'est pas oubliée, elle est banalisée. Ça va de soi en quelque sorte. Et nous approchons à peu près de la 100e session de négociation. Je rappelle quelques chiffres. Une guerre en 2014 de 4 mois, 10 000 morts en Europe. Une ligne de contact, c'est comme ça qu'on l'appelle, pour ne pas dire ligne de front, mais enfin, il y a des incidents chaque semaine, des enfants qui sautent sur des mines, des files d'attente qui sont atteintes par des tirs de mortier, etc. Sur 500 km, dans le hasard le plus complet, la ferme est d'un côté, le champ est de l'autre. Et sur ces 500 km, il y a 4 points de passage, avec des queues interminables de braves dames qui portent des sacs. Et vous savez bien que dans cette région, on est à moins 20 au mois de janvier et de février. Je ne développe pas. Il y a 1 millier d'observateurs de l'OSCE qui sont sur le terrain pour analyser les violations. Ce n'est pas une force des Nations Unies, c'est l'OSCE qui est au maximum de ses possibilités pour identifier si c'est des tirs d'armes lourdes, si c'est des mortiers de 80 ou des mortiers de 120 et évaluer la direction avec des drones autant que possible sur lesquels on tire, que l'on brouille au besoin, alors que normalement toutes les parties se sont engagées à respecter cette mission de surveillance sur le terrain. C'est vous dire que c'est une affaire grave et que finalement cette banalisation, alors que ceci touche une population d'à peu près 4 millions d'habitants, 3,5 millions sur place, 1,5 million de réfugiés, mais ces millions de réfugiés ne sont pas allés dans les capitales ou à nos frontières. Non, ils subissent depuis, disons, 4 ans, essentiellement en Ukraine, en partie en Biélorussie, en partie en Russie. Voilà une situation à laquelle on s'est habitué d'une certaine façon. Alors que ça n'est pas un conflit gelé, je tiens à le souligner, ça n'est pas le Karabakh, ça n'est pas la crise en Géorgie, ça n'est pas la Moldavie. Il se trouve que je me suis occupé plus ou moins, et pour certains longuement, de ces 3 conflits. Ils n'ont pas dérangé l'ordre de sécurité européen. Le conflit en Ukraine a remis en cause l'ordre de sécurité européen, avec ses forces et ses faiblesses. Mais il a 40 ans, cet ordre de sécurité, il remonte à l'acte final d'Helsinki. Voilà où nous en sommes. Le régime de sécurité collective, de facto, de l'Union européenne, du continent européen, et vous le savez, l'OSCE inclut les États-Unis et le Canada par le jeu des alliances, est suspendu par ce conflit. Et donc, tant que l'on ne sortira pas de ce conflit, on aura un régime qui flotte, qui est incertain et qui peut permettre d'autres abus et d'autres développements, sans parler de la souffrance qui s'approfondit et surtout du désordre qui s'installe. Car c'est une région qui se retrouve sans normes, sans loi, et il est temps de retrouver le moyen de définir des règles. Mon dernier point, c'est au fond dans l'intérêt aussi de la sécurité européenne, c'est le retrait unilatéral du traité sur les forces nucléaires intermédiaires qui vient d'être annoncé par les États-Unis. Et là aussi, traité de 1997, après une longue négociation, vous vous souvenez, les Pershing, les SS-20, etc. 30 ans de stabilité dans ce registre, des milliers de missiles qui ont été détruits et quelques codes qui se sont mis en place. Les conséquences immédiates, on les voit. C'est évidemment facile, et on peut s'y attendre dans le discours russe pour dire, eh bien voilà, encore les États-Unis qui rompent un accord, ils sont responsables, ils sont entièrement à l'origine de cette affaire, même si, vous le savez, il y a eu de graves interrogations sur le respect par la Russie dans les essais et la préparation de certains missiles. Plus généralement, pour tous les autres, c'est une sorte d'ouverture, et on sait très bien que ce genre d'abolition et de refus conduit les états-majors à faire des plans. Il faut penser à 5 à 10 ans, et un chef d'état-major, un ministre de la Défense, va se dire « je ne peux plus faire l'impasse sur cette dimension ». Et donc, ce sont des programmes d'armement qui se préparent. Alors, on peut se dire « ça y est, encore un dérapage ». Je glisse une idée, une option. Après tout, puisque ce traité, d'une certaine façon, et c'est l'argumentation américaine, a laissé de côté la montée puissante d'autres capacités de forces nucléaires et de forces nucléaires intermédiaires en Asie, et le sujet est vaste, je ne l'aborde pas, pourquoi ne pas essayer de rebondir? J'ai un exemple qui m'est venu à l'esprit. J'ai participé pendant 4 ans à la mise au point de la Convention d'interdiction des armes chimiques. Cette négociation durait depuis 7 ans. Et à la fin de la guerre Irak-Iran, il y a eu ce drame, vous savez, d'utilisation des armes chimiques contre la population irakienne par Saddam Hussein, Halabja, avril 1988. Assemblée générale des Nations Unies, sursaut, initiative de la France, convocation d'une convention, d'une conférence spéciale à Paris pour relancer la négociation sur l'interdiction des armes chimiques. En 2 ans, on a réglé ce qui traînait depuis 7 ans. Alors, c'est un concours de circonstances bien particulier, le sentiment d'une horreur inacceptable, mais enfin, on le savait et on négociait inlassablement en s'enlisant dans les problèmes techniques. Une volonté politique s'est manifestée. Donc, je pose la question, la signature a été lancée en 1983. Il avait 3 ans pour terminer tout ça. Pourquoi ne pas reprendre cette négociation sur les forces nucléaires intermédiaires? Alors, vous me direz quel cadre, quels participants? Certes, ce n'est pas simple. Une conférence. Mais aujourd'hui, comment peut-on encore organiser des conférences internationales? C'est très frappant. On a des réunions, des groupes d'Astana, des rencontres à Istanbul, à Genève, des bouts et des morceaux, une espèce de zapping perpétuel. Alors peut-être commençons par des formules intermédiaires, des panels régionaux, ou alors tout simplement pour poser la problématique, d'abord un bon rapport d'experts qui pose la question des forces nucléaires intermédiaires dans le monde et les risques qu'elles représentent. Je lance l'idée, je constate simplement que si on laisse aller les choses telles qu'elles sont sans avoir une espèce de sursaut d'abord intellectuel et de réflexion politique et stratégique sur les conséquences, nous préparons encore un cycle supplémentaire comme s'il n'y en avait pas assez de course aux armements. Alors, au fond, on a de nouveau ce choix aujourd'hui entre ce que j'appellerais le cynisme complet, la résignation, le brutalisme des initiatives ici ou là, et finalement la prospérité de l'unilatéralisme. Tout le monde est contre l'unilatéralisme officiellement et tout le monde se met à le pratiquer. Ce que nous n'avons pas obtenu, c'est une sorte de multilatéralisme où chacun, au fond, regarderait l'autre. Ce que l'on a, c'est du multi-unilatéralisme. Alors, si l'on veut continuer, on peut. On sait où ça nous conduira. Et je crois que les quelques exemples que j'ai évoqués sont des rappels pour essayer de réagir. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur. Donc, je pense que la transition est toute faite pour Artem, qui, à mon avis, ne refusera pas cette proposition d'une discussion sur les conditions d'arms control. entre Russes, Américains et Européens
Non,
notamment?
je ne voudrais pas parler sur les forces nucléaires, puisque c'est quelque chose au début. Et je pense que c'est un peu trop tôt à parler sur le sujet. Merci, Monsieur le Président Thierry de Montbrel, merci Thomas, merci mes collègues marocains pour l'invitation. Et maintenant, je pense que je dois switch to English, puisque j'ai passé quelques jours ici. Bien sûr, je suis pratiqué français, mais il n'est pas tellement bien à parler. Bon. I had no intention to speak on Ukrainian crisis and Russia's foreign policy because we talked with Thomas that it would be good just to cover more, let's say, peaceful and general issues, though I guess I should respond. I completely agree with what Ambassador Morel said on the Ukrainian crisis. And I want even to stress that Ukrainian crisis, to my mind, it should be one of the main issues for Russia's foreign policy for next foreseeable future, because the Ukrainian crisis brought us to nowadays relations with the Western world. It's to the greatest extent ruined the heritage of the previous President Putin presidentships, and to the greatest extent its Ukrainian crisis brought us to Syria on a kind of with absolutely technical reasons, with absolutely technical vision of what's happening in the Middle East, and then it's happened to be really strategic involvement. And this strategic involvement in the Middle East happened at, when we have really bad relations, institutional relations, and very often political relations with the major players in the Middle East. So this mixture of the two crises plus spoilations with those who were considered previously as main partners of Russia on the world scene really creates a tremendous problem for Russia's foreign policy. But the key crisis and the key issue and the key decision is, to my mind, in Ukraine, and Ukrainian crisis from our point of view should not be underestimated, as, to my mind, it sometimes happens. It's not quelque chose comme crise au fond. It's not a frozen conflict, as Ambassador Morel said. Unfortunately, it's conflict that goes on. Probably it's low-intensity conflicts. We somehow got used to this conflict. Europe got used to the conflict. Even Ukraine got used to this conflict. But this conflict should be settled. And I guess it's one of the main tasks for Russia's foreign policy. Now here I speak absolutely unofficially, in spite I'm associated with the university that deals in one puzzle with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Here I return to what I wanted to say, because the whole conference brought me to the idea which somehow knocked my mind previously, that really our world nowadays tends to be, let's say, a world without great ideas, without great trends. There is no this grand ligne as we had, let's say, in the 1990s, at the end of 1980s, at the beginning of the years 2000. It's less global world, but driven by in-country process. And this in-country process, somehow they overflow national borders and they went to the global scene. Look at Trump, look at Brexit, look at Saudi Arabia changes, look at Iran, very strange developments, look at Russia's and Turkey's foreign policy that both range from kind of autarky to interventionism. It's purely national phenomena, absolutely. But the phenomenon somehow that goes on international scene, but it's not a kind of one global trend. It's not one global tendency. And I guess this should bring us to more close, more attentive area country studies. And I guess this period should last rather long. It's kind of international decadence, if you like. But decadence doesn't mean something bad. It means that we have really very mosaic world, very diversified, very small tendencies. probably through these small tendencies, we could grasp some kind of general pattern. But we could live also without such a pattern as we lived, or our predecessors lived, in the world of the second half of 19th century, or the last 25 years of the 19th century, or as they lived in 1920s. It was a kind of development, it was a progress, but probably not as strong, not as dynamic, not as somehow homogeneous as we got used to have in 1980s, 1990s, in post-Second World War period, and we should get used to this kind of world. It brings more attention as, once again, the in-country process. And even economic growth shows that it's kind of Plato-style economic growth. Economists, they climb somehow to the Plato, and then they rather mildly slide down. Then they go again to the Plato, then slide down. There is no any more such growth as it was in the 1990s with dot-coms. There are no oil prices as main engines for the world economy. There is no any more such strongly growing China as it was even 10 years ago. So it's a kind of world of a more modest tendencies, more modest trends, and that is why it's not so easy to grasp what's happening in this world. But at the same time, there are some multilateral and global challenges. It's not to ruin under contemporary circumstances multilateralism, as it happens when those who are, let us say, grassroots brought by democracy to the very top of their countries. Here I don't mean personalities, I mean, let us say, grassroots tendencies, because Brexit, for example, it's not about personality, it's about trends brought from the very bottom, trends very unclear. It's rather about psychological moods in the British society than somehow then were converted to the political will that could destroy your part of Europe or could change strongly your part of Europe. Here I distinguish between two parts of Europe because we live in a slightly different world. But, and it's our must not to ruin what we need in multilateralism, because multilateralism usually built, and multilateral regulations, overall, overwhelming whatever regulations, they built by great tendencies, by great changes, as it happened after Second World War, as it happened after the end of the Cold War, as it happened at the beginning of this new era of the 1990s. Otherwise, with multilateralism ruined, the world could be simply a bunch of provincial or provincialized countries, those who go to, let us say, local, regional conflicting, those who go to local, regional, and sometimes, if they're strong enough, worldwide trade wars on a very specific issues. But these kind of things that are things which really harm what we mentioned here from the very beginning, harm everyday life of our people. And unfortunately, returning back at the end to my country, this kind of crises, as they voted here, they brought us very often to this narrow vision, the provincial vision, which fortunately, because we are not alone in this sometimes provisional vision, and unfortunately because too many countries nowadays happen to be provincial in a global, strategically global world. That is all what I wanted to say now. Then I can answer your questions, prerogative ones.
Thank you very much. Now I turn to Manuel Muñiz. Manuel, we have many discussions about technologies during these three days, namely dedicated to the transformation of business models. So I think it's good to listen to you because you will certainly explain to us also the transformation in international politics related to technology. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Thomas. So, you know, one of the things I find fascinating and that I've seen throughout this conference as well is that if you look back, say, 10, 12, 15 years ago, there was this thesis of the end of history, which I know was very controversial at the time that it was posed, but there was a certain consensus in the Western world that liberal democracy would move forward and sweep through the world, and open markets would do the same, and all of the other regimes were on the wrong page, on the wrong side of history, and this was going to be a slow process of expansion of this system. Now, what's interesting, and it's come up in this conference and it comes up repeatedly in events and meetings and gatherings that I attend, is that actually that order, the liberal order, the Western-led, rules-based order of open markets, porous borders, multiculturalism is very much fighting for its survival around the world. And I find that fight to be developing in two very particular fronts. I mean, one is the external front or the external dimension, and it's been mentioned here. Within that, the siege of the order, I think, is taking place in many areas, but I find three of particular importance. One is the rise of China, and of course, everybody has spoken about the rise of China, and if you look at, for example, military spending of China in the 1990s, in the early 90s, it was about 40 billion. The budget this year is about 175 billion US dollars. That's what the government has announced. Whether that's the precise figure or not is up to debate, but let's say it's 175 billion. And so the single most significant case of success of economic development of the last 30, 40 years happens to be of a deeply anti-liberal, anti-democratic country that has actually now begun to defend its model even beyond Chinese borders. So when you go to China, if you went 15 years ago, they would be fairly modest about the validity and efficacy of their system. If you go there today, you will find people that are much more bullish about their system and about how viable it is and useful it is for them, but also for regions around the world. So, the biggest development, geopolitical development in the last 40 years seems to point in the direction that actually a well-run, well-managed autocracy does very well in the space of economic development, military development, and others. And the argument in China now, by the way, speaking about technology, is that technology will help them solve some of the fundamental shortcomings of a centralized system, because through AI, they're going to be able to solve the information and coordination challenges of a centralized and planned economy, and also of an autocratic system that has fewer elections and few social and political rights, because through AI, they're not going to need the messiness of elections to understand what's happening to their people and react accordingly. So that's the messages coming out of China. The second external development, I think, is Russia and the autocratic drift of Russia, and not just that, but Russia's actions internationally. So if you look at the hacking campaigns and the electoral interference campaigns, I was having a very fascinating conversation with an EU official that works in the EU office that fights disinformation, and what you see is that these attacks, whether they happen in the Rust Belt in the US or the Midlands in the UK or France or in Catalonia in Spain, visually these attacks seek to undermine the institutions of the liberal order, quite evidently, in most instances. I mean, that's one of the features that connects them. But subversively, and this is a point that I think is sometimes missed, they seek to undermine our faith in our capacity to attain objective truths, right? So they attack the intermediation institutions, whether it's the press, political parties, or others. So they seek to make us question the truth and the honesty and legitimacy of the institutions we've built. So they're fundamentally anti-enlightened in the sense that they seek to undermine our faith in our own institutions. And they're having growingly, I think they're having success in various places, but they're clearly growing in intensity. Now, the third external dimension, I think it's the Middle East. And if you think about what's happened in the Middle East since the middle of the mid-2000s, but particularly since the Arab Spring, has been a systematic failure to democratize the region, right? I think except the case of Tunisia, some of the places where we thought we would be establishing or seeing democratic regimes emerge have actually gone back to even more autocratic regimes, and that's, for example, the the case of Egypt, which is particularly salient and significant because of the scale of Egypt. But that's also the case in Libya, and we're seeing an autocratic drift in Saudi Arabia, so it varies in perspective and in intensity. But if you look at the region, I think that the general thrust that we're seeing is actually a reversal of the democratization process. So this idea of the liberal order, of democratic regimes emerging, of the liberal trading system and others deepening, has actually been reversed in a number of places, but particularly I think under attack is the idea of liberal democracy as something that is unavoidable. Now what's fascinating is that to this external siege, which has been there in different forms and shapes for a long time, although punctured by these particular instances, as I mentioned, we are witnessing a real implosion of the liberal order from within the liberal countries. And this is consistent, and here I'm getting to the tech piece and others. So we've seen growing numbers of people within the Western world that question liberal values, whether it is multiculturalism or even democracy. Support for authoritarianism has risen almost consistently across the Western world, a questioning of democratic processes and others. Now, why is this happening? And here I have three fundamental points that I want to make. So we see a great deal of social fracture within the Western world, and some people have mentioned inequality and others, but I just want to give you some figures, right? And here is another instance of decoupling, by the way. You started with some contradictions of decoupling of economic growth at the aggregate and prosperity on the average. So in the US, 70% of households in the US have seen no real market income in the last 30 years, right? No real market income increase in the last 30 years. I mean, that's an astonishing figure, bearing in mind that the last 30 years have seen very rapid growth at the aggregate in the US, even if you take into account the economic crisis. If you look at, for example, life expectancy in some communities in the US, life expectancy has fallen for the next generation in the US for the first time since the Second World War in some mostly middle-class, white, economically depressed communities. Child mortality has doubled in some communities in the US again. I mean, this is really shocking data. We only see data like that in countries that have undergone a civil war. So some of you might have seen the work done by Angus Deaton on something he calls the deaths of despair, which is the number of suicides and deaths from opioid abuse. If I could show you a map of how wage stagnation and these deaths of despair overlap, you would see almost a perfect overlap. So there are communities within this liberal Western bloc that have clearly not benefited from the process of globalization and change to the economy that we've seen over the last 20, 30 years. This is producing a very significant political fracture, and this manifests itself in many ways, but I would only point to three that I think are significant. One is an increase in pessimism about the future within Western societies, about the economic future of the next generation, and this is, again, consistent in polls and surveys in the West. A great deal of anti-elitism, or a questioning of how the elites function under legitimacy. And again, we've seen this in polls time and time again, and we've seen a strong correlation between the sense of anti-elitism and anti-establishment sentiment and support for populism, which is, I think, the third manifestation of this. Now, this is, I think, one of the big puzzles of our era, which is we've seen huge growth in the aggregate. The US returned to pre-crisis GDP levels in 2012. I think the UK was about 2014. Even Spain, after a very deep economic crisis, has returned to pre-crisis GDP levels a few months ago. Spain has never created as many jobs or sustained as many jobs as it does today. That's at the aggregate level, but when you look at more granularly, lower level, the distribution issue is highly problematic. So we are failing literally at the manage of abundance, at the manage of prosperity within our societies. There is something that has changed in the structure of the economy that is leading to a lot of people being left behind and questioning that order. So I'll finish here because I promised I would be very strict on the time that was allotted to me. But when I think about this conference and when I think about world policy and world governance, I cannot say that I think the most significant thing that I see is that we are in shift. I think we're in an era transition that the liberal order is clearly under siege in a way that it has not been, at least since the end of the Cold War, if not before. But shockingly, it is really undergoing a process of implosion from within the order that is produced, in my mind, fundamentally by a compensation failure, which has prevented us from transferring gains in wealth and productivity and others to people within society that have simply been left behind of this process. And that picture, I think, is very worrying. I think very few people would have predicted that we would be here 10 years ago. And I think that unless we find ways, and some of us have spoken of fixing the fracture of our social contract moving forward, the political convulsion we're living will deepen, and the world will continue to shift to a more illiberal place where the rights of minorities will not be as respected as they have been, both in the West and in other places. We will live in a world with more walls and less movement of people and less commerce and others. And that basically, to me, means that we're very much living the return of history. I mean, we're moving back into a world where the fundamentals of political governance, both domestically and internationally, are up for grabs, and we enter this debate without knowing where it's going to lead. So for me, that's the backdrop to this conference, and that's one of the takeaways that I take home from this, and also from this panel, because various bits and pieces of this came up. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuel. Bien, nous allons finir ces présentations avec la voix de la sagesse, si j'ose dire, avec Fatala Walou. Monsieur le ministre, je vous cède volontiers la parole.
Bonsoir, mesdames et messieurs. Les Marocains ne peuvent être que fiers d'avoir abrité les débats de ces 3 jours. Je voudrais remercier Thierry pour son amitié qui a été confirmée hier avec éclat. Et comme chaque édition, comme Thomas l'a dit, il a brillamment fait le point sur l'état du monde. Moi, dans mon intervention, c'est une lecture des débats de ces 3 jours, ou d'une partie de ces débats. C'est celle d'un Marocain, donc d'un Maghrébin, d'un Africain et puis d'un associé à l'espace euro-méditerranéen. Il est vrai, comme ça a été dit depuis 2 jours, le monde d'aujourd'hui est étrange. C'est un monde qui est de plus en plus numérique et de plus en plus populiste. Un monde qui, normalement, devait évoluer vers une tripolarité, mais où on constate l'émergence d'une nouvelle bipolarité qui s'affirme entre les États-Unis et la Chine. Alors, mon commentaire va concerner 4 thèmes. Le premier, c'est la guerre commerciale. Cette guerre, elle n'est pas seulement commerciale, elle est surtout technologique. Et selon moi, elle va se traduire essentiellement par le renforcement de l'Asie et de l'asiatisme. Elle amènera la Chine à renforcer son marché domestique, ce qui est bien pour le reste du monde, mais en même temps à renforcer les échanges régionaux avec sa proximité asiatique. Et entre les grands pays de l'Asie, la géopolitique continuera à séparer, mais l'économie continuera à rapprocher. Et il me semble que c'est une bonne leçon pour notre région. Et c'est ainsi donc que l'Asie est en train de renforcer sa position en tant que centre de rayonnement de l'économie mondiale. Le deuxième thème, c'est celui du Moyen-Orient, qui nous concerne. Le Moyen-Orient est source de tensions, d'instabilité, de conservatisme. C'est le berceau d'économies rentières, renforcées chaque fois que le prix du pétrole monte, mais qui tourne le dos au vrai développement. Or, ce Moyen-Orient change de nature. le concept même, je crois, du Moyen-Orient, né après la Première Guerre mondiale, et à travers toute l'histoire entre l'Occident et la région, et le conflit entre Palestiniens et Israéliens, et le pétrole, eh bien, et même l'arabisme, et même le radicalisme islamiste, tout ça fait que ce concept est en train de disparaître. Aujourd'hui, le pétrole est acheté surtout par l'Asie. Et les échanges de la région se font surtout avec le Japon, la Corée, l'Inde et surtout la Chine. Le Moyen-Orient, en fait, devient l'Asie de l'Ouest, un concept qu'on retrouve dans les directions des ministères des Affaires étrangères asiatiques. Troisième thème, l'Afrique. Tout le monde dit, ça a été dit aujourd'hui dans le déjeuner, ça sera le continent du XXIe siècle. Parce que depuis 2000, il est l'objet de compétition de toutes les grandes puissances, à partir essentiellement du nouvel intérêt accordé par les pays asiatiques et notamment la Chine. Sa démographie, son urbanisme rapide peut être source de perturbations, certes, mais il s'agit là, me semble-t-il, de grandes promesses, car il s'agit de dividendes démographiques, avec sûrement l'émergence d'une couche moyenne qui n'est pas loin de l'Europe et de la Méditerranée. L'avenir agroalimentaire du monde se fera en Afrique, grâce à ses besoins et ses ressources en terre arabe. Et le Maroc, avec ses phosphates, a la volonté de participer à la promotion de cet avenir dans le cadre de partenariats bilatéraux avec nos frères africains, mais aussi triangulaires avec d'autres pays. Ça a été dit par le Premier ministre ivoirien, l'Afrique a besoin d'infrastructures, d'industrialisation, de besoins agroalimentaires, de formation. Mais c'est un grand challenge, bien sûr, aussi bien pour l'Afrique que pour ses partenaires. Alors, en quatrième lieu, que peut espérer un Marocain, un Maghrébin, un Africain face à cette évolution du monde? Le centre de rayonnement économique s'éloigne vers l'Asie. Le Moyen-Orient change de nature et bascule vers cette Asie. L'Afrique est là, avec ses problèmes, mais elle est porteuse d'espoir. Et c'est pour cela que le Marocain, avant tout, interpelle l'Europe, parce qu'elle est voisine de cette Afrique, et parce qu'elle est géographiquement méditerranéenne. Il interpelle l'Europe pour qu'elle soit plus cohérente, pour qu'elle rassemble ses parties, pour qu'elle comprenne tout simplement sa géographie et pour qu'elle autonomise ses approches et qu'elle œuvre pour une multipolarité face aux deux grands d'aujourd'hui et de demain, les États-Unis et la Chine, pour qu'elle œuvre pour redonner une centralité à la Méditerranée qui s'ouvre sur l'Afrique, pour qu'elle fasse en sorte que cette Méditerranée historique renaît et dialogue avec la nouvelle Méditerranée asiatique, et qui est aussi historique, c'est-à-dire la mer de Chine qui rayonne. En 2017, avec la sortie de la crise, nous avons cru que l'Europe allait reprendre et retrouver un nouveau souffle. Mais depuis le début de 2018, nous avons constaté qu'elle hésite. Le retour autrement à la Méditerranée et à l'Afrique de l'Europe, hier conquérante, dans une nouvelle approche de co-développement, de coproduction. Hier, l'exemple de Renault au Maroc a été présenté. Tout ceci va permettre la naissance d'une nouvelle mondialisation, multipolaire et partagée cette fois. L'Europe doit rester fidèle à ses valeurs, bien sûr. Le monde et notre région, on en a besoin de ces valeurs. Mais en même temps, elle doit reconnaître aussi les autres, les valeurs des autres, leurs aspirations, leur culture, leur spiritualité. Le monde multipolaire, le monde du partage, c'est un monde qui reconnaît l'apport de toutes les civilisations, la civilisation occidentale, bien sûr, la civilisation chinoise et asiatique, la civilisation africaine et arabo-musulmane. Le Maroc, pour conclure, est en train de lancer aujourd'hui, sous l'impulsion de notre souverain, une réflexion sur la révision de notre modèle de développement. Mais cette réflexion doit tenir compte, avant tout, des relations avec notre environnement, notre proximité, mais aussi avec le lointain. Le Maroc, et bien sûr, la géographie est têtue, un pays relais entre l'Europe et l'Afrique. Il attend l'émergence des conditions d'un Maghreb nécessaire pour la région, pour la Méditerranée et pour le partenariat euro-méditerranéen. Ce partenariat qui doit changer de nature. Le Maroc aspire avec volontarisme de s'ouvrir sur la modernité et en même temps de défendre son identité et sa spiritualité. Et à travers des rencontres comme celle-ci, il aspire à participer, à redonner de l'espérance à notre environnement, à notre Méditerranée, et c'est pour cela que nous continuerons à interpeller l'Europe. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Bien, mesdames, messieurs, il nous reste quelques minutes pour poser les questions, donc je vous demande de vous manifester si vous souhaitez poser des questions et peut-être les orienter vers un panéliste en particulier. Je ne vois pas de main se lever à ce stade. Alors moi j'ai une question le cas échéant, mais je tourne. La question que je voulais poser est... Ah, voilà, je vois mieux. Alors je vais néanmoins poser la question, mais on va les prendre et puis on va réunir les questions et puis les panélistes choisiront. 5 minutes? Ah, alors dans ce cas, je ne vais pas poser ma question, on va aller directement au premier. Non, parce que j'ai 11 minutes là devant moi, c'est pour ça que voilà. J'ai des informations. 11 minutes, d'accord. On va commencer par la salle et puis le cas échéant, j'ajouterai ma question. Sir.
Thank you. I've been listening to the panel today, and I've been trying to look for a grand unified theory of what might be going on. We have had, since the morning today, we have talked about the challenges that have arisen from the world being more connected, so-called, through technology, and we have looked at what challenges that is posing. We have looked at, over the last couple of years, couple of days, the questions of climate change and what that is doing in terms of creating difficulties. And we've talked about the questions of fake news and lack of trust and lack of dialogue, etc. So we're trying to see whether there's a common thread here. And I thought Mr. Muñiz made some really, really very good points. And my question is this to the panel here. To me, it seems that if we look at for a common challenge across those things, we are seeing, as you said, a breakdown of social compact. And the social compact was this, that those who have power, whether they have financial power, whether they have military power, whether they have information power, or whatever else, which we are seeing imbalances of today, would hold that power in trust for those who didn't have that power. And that is how those who didn't have the power allowed them to have that power, because those who have power really cannot hold it for any length of time unless it is with the consent of those who do not have that power. And it seems to me that what we are looking at is a breakdown of that entire notion where those who have power feel that it is theirs to keep and take without its being in trust for those who do not have it. And what we are seeing essentially, whether it is in the area of connectedness, I thought it was very interesting this morning that the entire panel felt either unwilling or unable to address the question of whether there is an ethical dimension involved in that entire thing. It was said that ethics is a personal thing. I think that's an oxymoron. Ethics exists in the relationship between two entities, two communities, two people, and so on, two persons. Similarly for whether it is fake news and lack of dialogue and so on. So my question for all of you today is, do you see any possibility that the political, technological, business, social leadership will begin to discover the importance of that social compact, which is that we really hold power and trust for other people?
Thank you very much. There was a question, yes, just close to you. Sir?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for Thierry and the organizers. I've missed the last two WPC, and I must say I deeply regret to have missed the last two WPC, but I particularly enjoyed the conversation we had for the last 3 days. I think it was extraordinarily rich, and the quality of the contribution from everybody was absolutely remarkable. So I'll make a point if I'm invited again to come back. The other thing I would like to, one of the themes that we've heard all along has been the Trump administration. And I would like to give you an opinion of somebody who's been living in the US for a long time, who originally was born an American, I'm what I call a foreign-born American, and somebody who didn't vote for Trump. I voted in 2016, and I'm part of the 7 million of Americans who didn't vote for Trump nor for Hillary Clinton. And when I was listening to some of the presentations, some of the comments that were made about the election and the likelihood and what's wrong with the Trump administration and Trump personality, I think we should listen to what Dean Muñiz was saying earlier on this afternoon. The issue is not whether we like Trump. The issue is why Trump was elected. And don't think this is only a Trump issue. Trump may not be elected. This is another issue. Whether he's going to be elected in 2020, that's another issue. It's far too early to say. But one thing for sure, the issues that have been raised and Trump has been very capable of using to get elected are not going to go away just by the fact that there might be another candidate. And the last, we have an election on November 6th, the day of my birthday. And on November 6th, the last polls, Rasmussen poll, which is very well known in the US, gives an approval of 48% for Trump. The midterm election is going to be on Trump. Why, as he was at 36, 37 2 weeks ago, why is he now at 48? Two reasons. One, the Kavanaugh confirmation. And two, the USMCA, the US-Mexico-Canada agreement. Those two facts mobilize his base. He's now stronger than he was in a long time, and we have the election in less than 2 weeks. So, I mean, if you want to have change in the US, I think we should start thinking, and those particularly who are on the Democratic side and the friends of the United States outside of the United States should start thinking about another way of approaching the issue by just bashing Trump.
Thank you. Thank you for these two very large questions. I will turn to two panelists to respond to them. First, Stuart, and we will finish with Manuel, who was very self-disciplined in his talking points, so you will have an additional 1 or 2 minutes to elaborate on the very first question. I think that's fair to finish in this way. So, Stuart.
First, I agree 100% with the last comment. I agree completely with the last point that was made with respect to Trump. Trump won 200 predominantly white counties in 2016 in the industrial Midwest that had voted for a black president and a black candidate, Obama, because he understood in ways that we did not the frustration of those in the working and middle class who felt left behind. They understood the lack of income distribution, and that was skillfully played on, I think, in a negative way by reinforcing fears. But those of us who want to come up with an ethical alternative, who want to restore the world order, the liberal world order, have an obligation to address those fears in a legitimate and positive way. We have to, for example, come up with tax policies and worker training policies that relate to the legitimate fears of working class people. Ironically, the tax bill that passed does just the opposite. It rewards the upper income people. But we have to also come up with a legitimate immigration policy, which doesn't appear to simply let the whole caravan come in without some checking with some asylum. So I think we've lost the narrative, and those of us who want to regain it have to be more than simply negative about what Trump is doing, and we have to come up with alternatives that deal with the legitimate concerns of lack of income distribution, of an uncontrolled immigration policy, or we will continue to be on the defensive.
Thank you. Manuel.
Yeah. So on the question of what brings all of this together, at least for me, what has really changed over the last, if you look at very long-term trends of change in the world, whether you're looking at the evolution of world population over the last 20 centuries, or global GDP, or data production by society, what you see is fairly linear change for centuries, with some increments in some of these categories. And about 150 years, 200 years ago, these metrics start to skyrocket. So world population only hit 1 billion people about the 1800s. It took another century for that to be 2 billion. By 2050, it'll be 9 billion, right? So you can see we generated more data in the last 2 years than in the prior 20,000, right? I mean, some of these metrics are just astonishing, right? So as a political scientist, I'm an academic, when I think about what's really challenging for governance, both at the national and international level, it is governing that velocity of transformation on so many fronts at the same time, particularly governing the externalities of these processes, right? So I didn't go into this in my intervention because I didn't have time, but I think that what's fundamentally driving the rise of populism is our inability to govern the velocity of change within the economy, particularly advanced economies, but not just advanced economies, and the shift in the labor market. So the contact point of tech and labor, and its impact on income stagnation and growing inequality, the decoupling, for example, of productivity and labor wages, which has been discussed widely by economists, is a fundamental change to the structure of the economy. We have become capable of gaining productivity of goods and services without increasing the amount of money we pay our workers or the number of workers that are employed. This is true in the US since about the 70s to today. So there's some fundamental changes, but for me it all goes back to this rapid technological change and the pressure it puts on governments around the world. And most governments are very much behind the curve. Now, I'll finish on something which is the idea of social contract. Why does it take us so long to address some of these issues, and how? And I think, the more I study political science, the more I realize that political entities, political bodies only move through the accumulation of economic and social pain on part of that body, right? And that pain needs to be elevated into the political discourse, and it needs to shape policy. When changes are not incremental, but they're really fundamental, the level of pain that needs to be accumulated is very high. And when we're talking about new social contracts, some of the things that need to be done, and this is a very green debate, but some of the changes to the taxation policy, to the redistribution policy, to the education policy are so fundamental, and to the cooperation across borders, that I think it's going to take a great deal of pain for these things to sip through and to actually end up being policy that is crafted. My concern with populists, in fact, and I'll finish on this, without calling any of the Trump voters deplorables and others, which I think it's a terrible way of addressing this, because they had real grievances, right? You only need to look at the data. How blind elites, intellectual elites in the West have been when you really look at the data. I lived in Boston for many years. You had to drive 3 hours outside of Boston to see some of the communities that I was just describing, with falling life expectancy and wage stagnation. I mean, the blindness. But what my concern about populism is that if this is the diagnosis, we need to govern this change. I'll be very quick. The recipes actually call for further international cooperation, for a larger role of the state in some instances, for the reinvention and the deepening of the welfare state. Are populists going to do this? My strong hunch is that, in fact, no, that they're going to worsen, and this is one of the tragedies of our time, that the forces that got these people elected will only be strengthened by their policies. So my concern is what comes after Trump or Syriza or the Movimento 5 Stelle in Italy.
Thank you, Manuel. Well, after these 3 days and after this final session, it seems to me, Thierry, that there are very good reasons to prepare the next edition of the World Policy Conference. But before that, I think we would like to welcome the panelists.